In the previous video, we talked about closures, and as much as we covered a lot in closures and giving you a good intro into what closures are in JavaScript, there's still a lot more that closures can do. And that is the core idea of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to see how you can extend closures. But what do I mean by extending closures? The core idea here is that when you create a callback inside of a loop, that callback usually closes over the variables that you get from the scope within which that loop has been created. So there are a number of there's the two keys that we use when we are creating variables, right? We use the let keyword and we also use the const keyword. Use the let and the const keyword to create variables. So with this let or const, each iteration that you do gets a new, let's call them binding. So what that means is that the callback that you had earlier on is going to remember the right value that you use later, even if the loop has finished basically executing what it needs to execute. Now, if that does not make sense, I'm going to explain it in a simple program that we're going to write as an example here. So let's say let's say you have a number of URLs, and this is the examples I'm going to use here are similarly the same thing that you'd use when you're building a real life application. So let's say you have a list of URLs, and these are the URLs that you're trying to even endpoints that you're trying to access, right? I'm going to create a number of them. So let's say we have a URL that is, let's say, /a.json, and I just want to essentially repeat the same thing over and over. So we'll have that and we'll have this. But this other one we'll call it C, and this second one we'll call it B. So it should be JSON. Why did I use JSONs? Okay, so it should be JSON. And so we have these three URLs, a.json, b.json, and c.json. Then I want us to create a simple for loop to iterate through these URLs. So we're going to just do some simple iteration, nothing new as far as for loops are concerned. So let's say we say let I is 0, then it should be a full colon here, not a full but a semicolon. Then we have a condition which will be I less than. Now this, because we already have an existing URL, so you can just use, rather an existing list, so we'll just say urls dot length so that we get the exact size of what you're dealing with there. And then we have our increment here, so the increment is going to be, of course, I plus plus. Once we have this for loop set up, then we can try to now basically get information from these URLs, right? To get this information, we usually use what we refer to as a fetch API. Now, we haven't looked at a fetch API so far, but it is something that we're going to look at later on. But we basically use we use the fetch API whenever you want to query information from something. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say fetch, and then it checks in a callback. Okay, or rather, this fetch itself is this fetch itself is a function that we are calling. Then it's going to take in each of the URLs that we have. Now, because we're using a for loop like that, so we have to say URLs and then specify the index of each URL, which is going to be I. Remember, we're still within the for loop. Okay. Then once you do this, we can just then say here dot then. So what this means is that once you have fetched the information from these URLs, then we can go ahead and have a callback. And what this callback is going to do is it's going to console.log just some statement that you want. And this statement would look like this. So again, just a simple arrow function. We'll just say console.log, and then we'll pass in a statement that you want. So let's say a statement something like we fetched a specific index in terms of this URLs that we have here. We'll say we fetched a specific index, and then we specify it's going to be something like I, like that. And we can close this here. So what we are doing here, essentially what you're doing here is that we are checking the URLs that are in this list. We of course are iterating through each of the URLs. And that is what this is doing here. So the for loop, and of course using URLs at index I, we're basically able to go through each URL at every iteration. Then using the fetch API, we're able to fetch some information that we want from this rather query. Let's say we're able to query these URLs. And then after that, this is where this dot then comes in. So after fetching, then we're going to go ahead in the console.log a statement that says that we fetched from a specific index. Okay. Remember, these are not real URLs, but this is how it would work in a real application. Now, when you say this let I that we have here, this let I is going to create a new iteration at every point to allow each URL, right? How this makes sense. I'm taking time to repeat this just to make sure that we get it right. And then the arrow function that we have here basically is going to close at every iteration. Okay. So whenever an iteration goes through, everything is fetched. You specify that we fetch from that specific iteration. Then when this dot then here runs, at any point in the future when it is running, it makes sure that we basically log the correct, for example, the correct URL. But the rule of thumb here, when you're creating such a program, is to always prefer using the let or the const keyword when you are dealing with such sort of mutations that we're doing, or these are what I refer to earlier on as bindings. Whenever you're creating any bindings like this one that can easily be muted, or rather that are easily mutable, then to avoid that, you use the let and the const keyword. Again, you saw what happened when you're looking at closures. And when we're talking about closures initially, we discussed how information basically does flow over.